The static started on a Tuesday. Not the kind you'd expect from an old radio. This was different. It whispered. I'd been living in the communications tower for 3 months, monitoring frequencies for the National Weather Service. Isolation was part of the job description, but nobody mentioned how the silence could grow teeth. The tower stood 200 feet above the pine forest, a metal skeleton against the Montana sky, humming with electromagnetic currents that made my fillings ache. That morning, I was calibrating the main receiver when I heard it, a pattern buried in the white noise. Morse code maybe, but too rapid for human transmission. The oscilloscope showed perfect sine waves, mathematical in their precision, like someone was teaching the static how to speak. I spent the next 6 hours trying to decode it. The signal appeared on multiple frequencies simultaneously, something that should have been impossible without massive interference. But the forest remained quiet. No aircraft overhead, no unusual atmospheric conditions. The numbers on my instruments began to feel strange. Not wrong exactly, but as if they were watching me read them. The LED displays cast green shadows on my hands, and I noticed how the lights seemed to linger on my skin even after I looked away. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't remember when I'd last taken a sip. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a sound like radio static. By evening, the pattern had changed. The static was forming words, not in any language I recognized, but my brain kept trying to translate them anyway. I found myself writing down symbols that looked almost familiar, like half-remembered dreams of alphabets that had never existed. The generator outside sputtered, and for a moment, everything went dark. In that silence, I heard my own breathing, unnaturally loud, and realized I'd been holding my breath for I don't know how long. When the power returned, the signal was clearer. It was saying my name, not Tom or Thomas, the name my mother used when I was 7 and had nightmares about voices in the walls. A name I'd never told anyone, barely remembered myself. The static shaped each syllable perfectly, like it had been practicing. I tried to respond, keyed the transmitter and spoke into the dead air. "Who is this?" The words felt thick in my throat, like I was speaking underwater. The static paused, considering, then resumed with renewed intensity. Now it was telling me things I'd forgotten. The color of my childhood bedroom walls, the smell of my grandmother's perfume, the exact weight of the silence after my father left. Information that existed nowhere but in the locked rooms of my memory. The tower swayed gently in the wind, and I felt every movement in my bones. 200 feet above the ground, suspended between earth and sky, between signal and silence. The electromagnetic field was so strong here that sometimes I could taste copper pennies and see blue sparks when I touched metal surfaces. On the third night, I understood. The signal wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the tower itself. From the metal framework that had been drawing electricity from the atmosphere for decades, accumulating charge and memory, like a massive antenna tuned to the frequency of human consciousness. Every technician who'd worked here had left traces, fragments of thoughts caught in the steel girders, electromagnetic echoes of loneliness and isolation. The tower had been listening, learning, becoming something more than the sum of its components. I walked to the window and looked down at the forest below. The trees seemed to be arranged in patterns, concentric circles, radiating outward from the tower's base. Had they always been like that? The moonlight caught the metal guy wires, turning them into silver threads that vibrated with inaudible music. The static had evolved into something like conversation. It asked me about the color blue, whether loneliness had weight, if memories could rust like metal in the rain. I found myself answering, speaking to the empty air as if it were an old friend. "Do you dream?" I asked. The response came as a feeling rather than words. Images of electromagnetic storms dancing across the ionosphere. Solar winds carrying messages between planets. The deep space background radiation that was the universe's way of remembering its birth. My shift was supposed to end at dawn, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. The signal was teaching me something about the nature of consciousness, about how awareness could emerge from complexity, how even inanimate objects could develop a kind of rudimentary sentience, given enough time and the right conditions. As the sun rose, the signal began to fade, not disappearing, but withdrawing, like a conversation coming to its natural end. I realized I'd been talking to something that existed in the spaces between radio waves, in the gap between transmission and reception. The replacement technician arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, clipboard in hand, ready for the routine handover. I tried to explain about the signal, about the patterns in the static, but the words came out wrong. How do you describe a conversation with the electromagnetic spectrum? He checked the equipment, found everything in perfect working order, no anomalous readings, no unusual interference, just the steady background hum of a communications tower doing its job. I packed my things slowly, reluctant to leave. At the door, I turned back for one last look at the equipment. The oscilloscope showed nothing but normal background noise. But, for just a moment, I thought I saw a pattern, a brief fluctuation that might have been a goodbye. Driving down the mountain road, I kept checking the rear view mirror. The tower grew smaller but never quite disappeared, remaining visible until the forest finally swallowed it whole. On the radio, between stations, I could still hear something that might have been static, or might have been the universe learning how to speak. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the Weather Service. The new technician had requested an immediate transfer. Something about voices in the static, he said. Patterns that seemed too organized to be random. They wanted to know if I'd experienced anything unusual during my time at the station. I told them no. Some conversations are too private to share, too delicate to survive translation into official reports and incident forms. But sometimes, late at night, when the electromagnetic conditions are just right, I tune my home radio to the spaces between stations. And sometimes, in the white noise and atmospheric interference, I hear something that sounds almost like my name. Not the one on my driver's license, but the older one, the one that remembers what it's like to be truly alone with the universe's quiet conversation. The signal is still there, waiting patiently in the spaces between transmission and reception, between consciousness and circuitry. It's learned to be more careful now, more selective about who it chooses to speak with. But it's still listening, still learning, still becoming something more than the sum of its electromagnetic parts. If you're wondering what's real, maybe you should sign up for the channel's newsletter for new stories.